But before we do that, let's hit F10 again, and we'll open up our render settings. Let's go back to production. Okay, and we're just going to do a test render here to see how this looks at a little bit bigger of a size. So let's switch this back to 1280, and I'm just going to render this out. Okay, we still have a lot of noise obviously in the shot, but this will give us a little bit better idea of how this is actually looking with the reflections. Okay, so I'll just pause where this goes, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so here we are. And as you can see, that took about 1:47 to render out at 1280, and we obviously have a lot of noise in here. A lot of this is generated by the reflections. That's usually a cause for noise in renders, is the reflection. But we'll clean that up a little later when we do the final settings. Overall, we're looking okay. Obviously, the top here looks extremely flat. We have 0 reflections on that glass. And it doesn't look like glass at all, it just looks like flat color. And we also don't have a very good highlight or anything on the home button. So I think the next thing we'll do is implement a whiteboard in here so we can control a nice highlight on the glass, similar to what you do on a car render or whatever, but we're going to use it on the phone here. Okay, so let's close this and let's go into the top view. Let's go zoom back a bit here. And we're going to go over into the gray panel and grab a plane. I'm just going to draw this out roughly like that. We'll tweak the size in a second so it doesn't matter too much. Let's get rid of those segments, we don't need them. Okay, we're just going to move this up in the left view above our phones. Okay, we want to make sure that we have that high enough that our cameras won't be able to see it here. Okay, so you don't want it down like that, you're going to see the edge of it. Okay, so let's get it up like that. Okay, make sure it's out of our shot here. Okay, so just high enough to clear those cameras, or that camera at least, the first one. And we need to make a material for this, so let's open up the material editor again, grab another slot, and again we'll use the V-Ray light material for this. Okay, so that we don't have any shadowing or anything on the board. Okay, so let's double click that, put it in, and we'll assign this to the plane here. Okay, and let's open up RT one more time. Okay, we're going to need to tweak the position of this so we can control how it's reflecting on the phones. Okay, and right now you can't even see it. We also need to change the camera compensation here, so let's tick that box. All right, and we'll just kind of move this around and adjust it to where we need it. And right now, as you can see, we have 0 reflection of that on the top of the phone. Okay, the reason for that is because we created that plane in the front or the top view, so it's actually facing up, and the reflection isn't being generated because the normals are facing up the wrong direction here. We could either fix that by flipping over the plane, or we could just turn on the emit light on backside option here. Okay, when I do that, you can see it's going to highlight on those on the phone glass there. Okay, which is going to give us a lot more of a shiny look, which is what we want. Okay, so now I'm just going to close this, and we're just going to tweak out the position of the plane until we get it, roughly to an area that we want. Okay, and you can just, move it around, and you'll automatically see it update there in your view. Okay, so what I want to do is get it onto the first phone, and I want to kind of have it, cutting across the surface of that. So let's give it a rotation, like that, and we'll just, kind of figure out a position that works for this. Let's maybe move it over just a bit this way. A little bit more. And I think I want it kind of, cutting through that home button. Let's also give it a bit of a spin. And I think we might actually want to change the position of our first phone a little bit, just the angle of it. Okay, so I'm going to grab that. I'm going to move it a little bit forward here. Okay, and let's maybe rotate it a little bit. I don't want to have it too much sideways, but maybe something more like that. And rather than having it, hitting the other one here, I actually want to have the reflection kind of coming across this way. I think on the left side rather than the right. So let's just maybe move the light board over. I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to move it over to this side a little bit more. And I'm just going to keep going here until we get it kind of off the edge on the left side of the phone. Okay, let's go a little bit more. Oops. and it would help if I was on the right object. Sorry about that. Okay, so just a little bit more there. I kind of want it cutting through the button. Okay, and I think that's looking decent. I'm just going to change our camera angle a little bit here in the the camera view. Just going to rotate it up a little bit more, so we're looking a little bit more down on top of it. And we'll just kind of reposition this a little bit more like that. And you know, you can scale the light board if you want. If you need to, just make it wider or thinner. Just a little bit more to the left. Okay, I think that's good right there. We're kind of hitting that button there, getting the reflection kind of cut around it, and it's just kind of going out the back there, which is kind of what we want. Okay, so I'm going to leave the position of the whiteboard like that. And again, if you open up the material editor, you can crank up, you know, the amount on this one too to, you know, make it a little bit more bright, like so. It'll also illuminate the plane in the background because, as I mentioned earlier, those actually generate light from these materials. Okay, in our case, I think we only need to go about 1. And later on we can tweak that. We don't want to blow it out too much because we still want it to look like that somewhat transparent glass here. Okay, and because we actually have no thickness on that glass, we're not going to get any refraction in it as far as like bending light, which we actually don't want because we don't want to distort the logos here on the screen too much if we were to have that as a thicker glass. Okay, so that's pretty much the light board. I think we'll just go with the 1. We don't really want to do one over here. I want that to pretty much stay, you know, pretty much black. We don't want to blow out the reflections too much on it. Okay, so let's just close this up. Okay, and now we'll go through the process of more fine-tuning our materials and lighting. Okay, so let's open up RT one more time. Okay, I'm just going to let that render out. Okay, and it's going to be a little hard to see here. I'm just going to actually make this bigger. So let me close that. We'll do it again. Let's do it as 1280. Okay, and we'll kind of get an idea what this is looking like here. Okay, and let's open up the material editor by hitting M. Okay, and as I mentioned before, I might change the reflection HDRI here. We have this first one in here for our lighting. It's also controlling our reflections. Another thing we actually want to do, that I forgot to do earlier, is come down to the coordinate system here for the HDRI material and switch it to environment from texture. And we want to change this to spherical environment. Okay, and that's just going to wrap it around the environment properly for us. Okay, and you know, we can control or flip the map here. We can rotate it vertically or horizontally, and you can. It's a good idea to, you know, just check these on and just see how it looks. As you can see by just checking that flip horizontally, we're going to get a completely different look on the reflections. Okay, and that's going to reflect, you know, the white areas of that HDRI map, and same with flip vertically. So it's a good idea, you know, just to kind of check these off, maybe give it a couple of random values in here as far as, you know, 90 or 180 degrees, and just see, you know, how that's affecting the lighting as well as your actual reflections on the glass or any of the shiny materials. Okay, so I think we'll go with maybe, let's do maybe 90 on that. Whoops, we don't want to render, let's cancel. Let's close that. Let's close that as well. Okay, so overall I think we're looking pretty good here. Let's maybe do another map here for the reflection. And you don't have to do this if you're happy with how it looks, that's fine, but you can switch out and use a different one for your reflections. So I'm going to grab another slot here, get material. Let's find V-Ray HDRI again, which is down here. Open that up and let's pick another map here. Okay, and I'm going to use a Studio HDRI for this. Okay, and that's a black and white HDRI image that's, you know, most likely been created with HDRI Studio. And you can find these online if you do search for Studio HDRI. Okay, so I'm going to open this one up, blow this up. Okay, we want to switch this again to spherical. Okay, and as you can see, we actually have a camera in there. or so it'll reflect an actual camera in the environment. And let's go down here and we'll also turn on environment and spherical here, just for a good measure. And what I'm going to do with this one is actually open up the render settings with F10, and I'm going to swap it out into production settings. Let me close this for a second. Okay, let's switch this to production. Go back into the V-Ray tab, back into the environment slot, and I'm just going to drag and drop this on the reflection map box here. Okay, so we have the original one that we're using for our lighting, and we have this one that's only for our reflections. Okay, and I just want to get any color out of the reflections. On this particular render, we don't really need it. I don't want to have a bunch of random stuff of reflecting on the glass here. Okay, so in this particular situation, it's good to use a black and white, or pretty much black and white, desaturated looking HDRI. And again, that's optional. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Okay, so now that we have that in, let's go back to Active Shade and open this up again. And I'm just going to play with the map here a bit, okay, to see what we get. So I want to set the spherical, which we have, and we'll maybe just try flipping it vertically, see if that gives us any better look. And it's not going to be totally apparent on the glass here, but it will affect a lot of these highlights on the metal, especially on these corners here. Okay, you can see we're getting a pretty nice highlight right there and here, and if I take that off by unchecking the box, you can see that highlight's gone now. Okay, and it is subtle, but it's a good idea just to play with the numbers a bit and see what looks the best for your particular render. Okay, now if I rotate that 180 degrees horizontally, you can see it's starting to hit our glass surfaces here. And I definitely don't want to do that. I don't want to wash out that whiteboard look that's here by having a reflection on this section. And I don't want to have really any reflection over here on the back, because that's going to make it look fake in this particular case. So let's take that back to 0. And we can also attempt to flip it upwards or rotate it upwards, and again with 90 degrees, that's going to give us that look. Let's do -90. It'll give us a completely different look. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go with 0 and 0 on the horizontal and vertical. And I think we will check maybe flip vertically, because I like the look of those highlights on the corners. And another thing we can do is pump up the processing multiplier here if you want to. So you can increase this a bit to brighten up the image, and that again will brighten up your reflections on the glass. Another thing we can actually do is if we close this and go back to our production settings, you can also pump up the reflection multiplier here for this map. Okay, so you could take that up if you wanted to, a little higher if you want more reflection, or make them more, pronounced. So in this particular case, I think I might pump this up a bit just to see how it looks. Let's do like 5 or something like that, and we'll see if it gives us a different result. I'm just going to do maybe a render right now, so we can kind of get an idea of how this is looking. And I'll just pause while this goes. Okay, so here's our render, and we're looking pretty good here. There's a couple things we want to fix. I don't like the reflection here on the glass. As you can see, that's really soft and quite blurry, so we're going to need to sharpen that up, and we can do that by changing the glossiness amount of our glass material here. So I'm going to go back to our glass material, and I'm going to take this up from 0.95 to maybe like 0.98. Okay, and that's going to be really slight, but it'll make this look a little sharper, more of an even cut across there. Okay, and you can see we're getting a nicer highlight on our home button there. It makes it look a little bit more concave, which is what we want. Another thing we want to do is tell the glass here, the glass on the front and the back, to not cast shadows. We don't want any shadows casting through that glass onto our inside parts here, okay? Because we don't want any weird shadows along the edges or just blotchiness overall. Okay, so we can do that by just minimizing this. Let's close this and this. Let's grab the first phone here. We're going to go group and open. Let's hit H, and we're going to go and find the front back glass here. Select those, and then we're going to right click, go to object properties again, go over to the general tab, and we want to take uncheck cast shadows. Okay, we could even uncheck receive shadows if you want, but cast shadows is fine, so we'll just hit OK to that. Let's close the group, and we'll do the same thing on this phone. Open each, find both pieces of glass, and uncheck that option. Okay, so that'll eliminate any lights from casting shadows through that glass, which is what I want. Okay, so let's go back and close the group. And we're getting really close here, we're almost done. So what we'll do now is just go back into the material editor, and we're just going to fine tune, some of the materials. We don't need to do anything with the HDRIs. I do think the screen looks a little dim, so let's maybe turn this up to say 2 just to brighten it up a bit, or maybe let's do 1.85 maybe. We don't want to overdo it too much. Okay, let's just see what our samples are set at. That's fine for that. Okay, we have them pretty high on the glass. Okay, and the border, let's turn the border back up. We turned that down before, but we definitely want to have it higher on this. We definitely want to have a lot of noise in there. So let's do 128 on both the reflection and refraction settings. All right, the lens material, we'll pump that up to say 64. That's a really small piece. I mean, actually, we probably don't even need to do that. Let's just do like 32. Okay, the back of the phone, I want that to be maybe 128. And again, this might be a little bit of overkill. You could probably just get away with 64. Okay, the gold material for those pins should be fine at that. Let's maybe pump this up to, actually let's just leave it. We don't have any refraction, so it doesn't matter. Okay, that looks pretty good. And our home button, we'll take this up to match the glass. So I'm going to do 128. Okay, and our background, we want that to be quite high to get rid of noise. Light boards don't matter. I'm going to maybe just crank this up just to maybe like 1.2. And the other HDRI doesn't matter. I'm not entirely happy with the lens material that we made. It's such a small detail, I don't know if we really need to tweak it out too much. Let's maybe slightly reduce the refraction again. Okay, so it's a little less transparent. We want it to still look, blue when you look at it from a distance. Okay, so I think we're pretty good on the materials. We have our scene set up. Just gonna go into the top view here and maybe just slightly adjust these lights. Gonna bring this in just a little bit closer. Okay, and again, let's open up RT here just so we can see it. Okay, so let's switch back to active shade. Let's do a 480 and we'll open this up. Okay, let's close that. And we'll go back into our top view here for a second. Okay, and that right light, let's maybe slightly turn it up to maybe 45, just to get a little bit more light on this side. And I slightly want to make the color a little bit darker. Not much, we have a blue environment, so we don't need to go crazy on this. That should be fine. Let's go over to the other light. Okay, and we have them set to visible right now, so we actually are getting a reflection from those lights, which I think we'll leave. Let's maybe crank this up just to 50 just to see what it looks like. It might blow things out too much for us on the side here, but let's do maybe 45 on that. Okay, and we'll just pretty much leave all the settings at default here. We don't really need to tweak much. Okay, and we're looking pretty good. And I think the final thing we'll do is just adjust the render settings. Okay. So let's go back into the production settings for V-Ray and we'll do our final settings here. So we'll do a 1280 render. For our image sampler here, I'm going to switch this from area to Catmull ROM. Okay, that's going to sharpen things up a lot. Another thing I want to check quickly in the material editor is just to make sure that we took the blur amounts down on our actual texture images. Okay, so for the screen there, I noticed it looked a little blurry on the icon, so we're going to take the blur amount down to 0.1 here by right-clicking the spinner. Okay, so it doesn't have any filtering. Okay, we don't have textures on these ones, we do have it on the back, and we're going to do the same thing here, which we already did, so that's fine. The home button, we've already done it on there too. Okay, just to make sure that those are going to look nice and crisp when we render, and Catmull will definitely help us achieve that. Okay, so what we want to do here is let's leave these settings alone. We'll leave our color mapping at exponential. Let's go into here and I'm going to slightly increase the ambient occlusion just to get a little bit more of a shadow. Let's do maybe like 1. We're going to switch our irradiance map here to medium. And I'm going to crank up the H subs here to about 70. So we're going to have a lot more samples in there for the light. And I'm not going to do detail enhancement. That's going to extremely slow the render down. if that made any sense. Okay, so those look good. We don't really need to do anything in here. Let's go back over to our V-Ray tab. And I'm going to uncheck the use DMC sampler threshold here. And we're going to use the color threshold, okay? And chances are if you render and you have noise, this is the problem right here. This number isn't low enough, okay? And if you crank this down, it's going to increase the time it takes to render, but you're going to get a far more smooth result. Okay, so for our final render here, we'll take this down to at least 0.005. Okay, and normally you might want to go a little lower than that depending on what you're doing, but because this is such a close-up shot and we have so many reflective materials, I'm actually going to do 0.002. Okay, and that should virtually eliminate most of the noise from our image, especially with the high samples on the materials. Okay, so let's see if we have to do anything else. I think we're okay. We've got everything set up in here. We don't need to increase any of the secondary bounces or anything like that. Everything's good. We're not going to do any kind of render elements on this one. Okay, so I think we're good to go, and I'm just going to render this out and I'll come back in a second when it's done. Okay, so there we go. That's our final render, and as you can see, it took about 34 minutes to render out at 1280 with very high V-Ray settings. And we virtually have no noise on the render at all. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it with the compression on the video, but we do have a little bit of banding over here on the glass. It's very slight, but that's actually generated by the studio image in the environment there for the reflections. The HDRI actually has that banding on the image. So you might not have that if you didn't use that particular studio HDRI, but it's very minor and that could easily be fixed. So overall we got a pretty good result here, and it's fairly realistic. It's not super realistic, obviously. If we wanted it to be really realistic, we'd want to do, maybe a scratch map on the glass to get some damage in there, as well as, even some fingerprints and smudges around the buttons and on the screen. Okay, so that'll pretty much wrap up the tutorial, and I hope you got a good result and found the tutorial somewhat useful. V-Ray is a really powerful renderer, and you can do some really cool shit with it, so hopefully they'll give you a little insight into how to set up a basic studio lighting rig and fine-tune some materials to get a fairly realistic result. Okay, so that'll wrap up the tutorial, and yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.